Beverly Guenther begged for her life as a knife plunged into her body again and again, her screams echoing to the darkness before hands wrapped around her throat and squeezed until silence fell. Her killer was someone who had once whispered, "I love you," in her ear, someone she tried desperately to escape. On January 3rd, 2023, Amber McLaughlin became the first openly transgender person executed in the United States. But before the headlines focus on identity, there was a victim whose name deserved to be remembered: Beverly Guenther. What led to this historic moment began with obsession, escalated to stalking, and ended in brutal murder. What transforms love into lethal obsession? How does someone cross the line from heartbreak to homicide? The answer lies buried in a story so disturbing that it took a jury less than 2 hours to recommend death. Amber McLaughlin had spent 7,305 days knowing this moment would come. 7,000 days to think about those final, terrifying minutes when Beverly fought for her life. 7,000 days to prepare for the walk to the execution chamber. The last meal would be ordinary, comfort food that reminded of simpler times. The last words would attempt to capture a lifetime of regret in a single breath. But nothing about this case was ordinary, and what happened next would make headlines around the world. November 2003, St. Louis County, Missouri. Beverly Guenther, 45, had tried to rebuild her life after ending her relationship with Amber McLaughlin. The breakup hadn't been clean, nothing about their relationship had been simple, and the ending had been messier still. Beverly worked at the office supply store, maintaining the same schedule she kept for months. Predictable, reliable, fatal. McLaughlin knew that schedule by heart. For weeks, McLaughlin had been watching, following, calculating. The restraining order Beverly had obtained was just paper, meaningless against obsession that had metastasized into something far more dangerous. Friends had warned Beverly to be careful. Family members had urged her to vary her routine. But how long can someone live in fear before exhaustion sets in? The harassment had escalated systematically. Phone calls that started as pleas became threats. Unexpected appearances at Beverly's workplace transformed from desperate attempts at reconciliation into calculated intimidation. The legal system had tried to intervene through restraining orders and police reports, but enforcement was reactive, not preventive. McLaughlin's emotional state following the breakup had deteriorated rapidly. The end of the relationship wasn't just rejection. It was perceived as betrayal, abandonment, the destruction of a future that had been carefully constructed in an increasingly unstable mind. Alcohol became a companion. Cocaine provided false courage. The combination created a chemical cocktail that dissolved whatever barriers remained between thought and action. Beverly finished her shift at the office supply store just as she had hundreds of times before. She walked to her car, keys in hand, probably thinking about dinner or weekend plans or the thousand mundane concerns that fill ordinary moments. She didn't notice the figure watching from across the parking lot. She didn't see the car that began following her as she pulled onto the street. The pursuit began subtly. McLaughlin maintained distance, staying several car lengths behind as Beverly navigated familiar streets toward home. Something changed. Perhaps Beverly glimpsed the same car in her rearview mirror too many times. Perhaps instinct whispered warnings that conscious thought couldn't yet process. She began to drive differently, faster, taking unexpected turns. The realization that she was being followed hit her like ice water. Beverly tried to lose her pursuer, but McLaughlin knew these streets as well as she did. Every turn Beverly made, McLaughlin anticipated. The chase had begun, and McLaughlin had no intention of letting it end without resolution. The decision came down to a traffic light. Beverly had to stop. McLaughlin seized the opportunity. The abduction happened in seconds. McLaughlin approached Beverly's car, weapon visible, demands clear. "Get out. Get in my car. Do it now." Beverly's resistance was immediate but futile. McLaughlin was prepared for defiance. The threats escalated to violence. Beverly's attempts to escape were met with force that left no doubt about McLaughlin's intentions. During the transportation to the secluded location McLaughlin had chosen, Beverly knew she was going to die. The knowledge didn't come as a sudden revelation. It built gradually as McLaughlin's behavior made intentions clear. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about control, punishment, and the ultimate expression of ownership over another human being. The location was isolated. No witnesses, no interruptions, no chance of rescue. Beverly was forced in the car, her pleas for mercy meeting only cold calculation. McLaughlin had rehearsed this moment, had imagined it, had prepared for it. The sexual assault came first. Beverly's body was violated as her mind tried to process the impossibility of what was happening. Someone who had once claimed to love her was now demonstrating the most brutal form of hatred. The rape wasn't just about sexual gratification. It was about power, humiliation, and the complete destruction of Beverly's autonomy. But McLaughlin wasn't finished. The knife appeared without warning. Beverly's screams pierced the silence as the blade found its mark. Once, twice, again and again. Each wound was deliberate, calculated to inflict maximum pain while prolonging the inevitable. Beverly fought for her life, but McLaughlin held every advantage. The stabbing continued until Beverly's resistance weakened. Blood loss and shock began to claim her consciousness. But McLaughlin wanted to be certain. Hands wrapped around Beverly's throat. The strangulation was methodical, sustained, final. McLaughlin watched the life leave Beverly's eyes. After the murder, McLaughlin faced the practical problem of disposal. Beverly's body needed to be hidden. Evidence needed to be minimized. The crime scene needed to be cleaned. McLaughlin's behavior during these moments revealed the calculating nature of the violence. This wasn't a crime of passion followed by immediate remorse. This was a planned execution, followed by careful evidence management. Beverly should have been home by 7:30 p.m. By 8 p.m., concern crept into her family's evening routine. By 9 p.m., worry had transformed into fear. The phone call started immediately. Beverly's family contacted her workplace, her friends, anyone who might know where she was. Beverly had simply vanished. The police response was immediate and comprehensive. Missing person procedures were initiated within hours. The investigation quickly focused on McLaughlin. The history of harassment, the restraining order, and the timing of Beverly's disappearance created a clear pattern of suspicion. The discovery of Beverly's body came sooner than McLaughlin had anticipated. A passerby noticed something unusual in the secluded location where McLaughlin had hidden Beverly's remains. The condition of Beverly's body told the story of her final moments. The multiple stab wounds, evidence of sexual assault, and signs of strangulation painted a picture of calculated brutality. The forensic examination revealed the extent of the violence Beverly had endured. DNA evidence was collected and would eventually link McLaughlin to the crime scene. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness statements about McLaughlin's stalking behavior, the restraining order documentation, and physical proof from the crime scene. The warrants were issued within days. Murder in the first degree, rape, kidnapping. The charges carried the possibility of death, and McLaughlin knew it. By the time officers arrived at McLaughlin's last known address, the apartment was empty. The hunt had begun. McLaughlin's capture came through a combination of good police work and poor decision-making. After days of evading authorities, McLaughlin made contact with an associate who was already under surveillance. The phone call was traced. The location was identified. The arrest was swift and decisive. The confession, when it came, was delivered with surprising matter-of-factness. McLaughlin admitted to killing Beverly Guenther. The details provided matched the evidence investigators had gathered. The sexual assault was acknowledged. The stabbing was described. The strangulation was admitted. But McLaughlin's confession came with justifications, claims about emotional distress, and assertions about Beverly's behavior that had supposedly provoked the violence. The formal charges against McLaughlin carried the full weight of Missouri's criminal justice system: capital murder, rape in the first degree, kidnapping in the first degree. The prosecutor's decision to seek the death penalty was based on the aggravating factors present in Beverly's murder: the sexual assault, the stalking behavior, and the brutal nature of the crime itself. McLaughlin's defense strategy centered on mental health claims and mitigation evidence. Defense attorneys presented evidence of childhood trauma, substance abuse, and mental illness. The defense argued that these experiences had created psychological damage that contributed to the violent behavior. The trauma was real, but its relevance to the crime was disputed. The trial proceedings were methodical and thorough. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming: DNA evidence, witness testimony, and McLaughlin's own confession. The defense's attempts to avoid the death penalty were comprehensive but ultimately unsuccessful. Despite the mitigation evidence, the jury was not persuaded that McLaughlin's background excused the brutal murder of Beverly Guenther. The verdict was swift and decisive: guilty on all charges. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours. The jury's recommendation for the death penalty was unanimous. The aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating factors presented by the defense. McLaughlin was sentenced to death for the murder of Beverly Guenther. January 3, 2023. Nearly 20 years had passed since Beverly Guenther's death. 20 years of appeals, legal challenges, and delayed justice. 20 years of McLaughlin living on death row while Beverly's family waited for the sentence to be carried out. The final day had arrived. The execution date had been set and reset multiple times as McLaughlin's legal team exhausted every possible avenue of appeal. Federal courts had reviewed the case. Clemency petitions had been filed. Last-minute stays had been requested and denied. Governor Mike Parson had denied the final clemency request. There would be no more delays. McLaughlin's final meal request reflected the simplicity of someone who had accepted the inevitable: a cheeseburger, French fries, strawberry milkshake, and peanut M&Ms. The meal was ordinary, unremarkable, almost childlike in its familiarity. McLaughlin's final hours were spent in preparation for death. Spiritual advisors were consulted. Legal representatives made final contacts. The written statement that would serve as McLaughlin's last words was prepared and reviewed. The final statement was brief and inadequate. "I am sorry for what I did. I am a loving and caring person." 24 words to summarize a lifetime of choices that led to Beverly Guenther's death. The statement acknowledged guilt but offered no specific mention of Beverly by name. The words were hollow, insufficient, and final. The execution procedure at Missouri State Prison was carried out according to established protocols. McLaughlin was transported to the execution chamber, where witnesses had already gathered. The administration of lethal injection was monitored by medical professionals and corrections officials. The procedure was designed to be humane, while ensuring that the sentence was carried out completely. The pronouncement of death came at 6:51 p.m. McLaughlin was 49 years old. The sentence imposed nearly 20 years earlier had been carried out. The historical significance of McLaughlin's execution extended beyond the specific case. McLaughlin was the first openly transgender person to be executed in the United States. The execution raised questions about gender identity, treatment of transgender individuals in the criminal justice system, and the intersection of identity politics with capital punishment. But before the headlines focus on identity, there was Beverly Guenther, a 45-year-old woman who had tried to rebuild her life after ending a toxic relationship. A woman who had sought legal protection when her ex-partner's behavior became threatening. A woman who had done everything right but still became another victim of domestic violence. Beverly deserved to grow old. She deserved to redecorate her living room, to continue her career, to find love again if she chose. Instead, she became another statistic in the catalog of domestic violence deaths. Her story serves as a reminder that legal protections are only as strong as the will to enforce them, and that some threats cannot be managed, only escaped.